name is Chris Onyibe. Welcome to Say a Prayer Ministries. I hope you had a lovely week last week. So do you remember how last week's video ended? So basically it ended with the book of Ruth, and when she got married to Boaz, we established that basically the purpose of that story was because their son was the grandfather of David, who was eventually like the descendant of Jesus. Okay, transitioning from that, we are now in the books of 1st and 2nd Samuel. It starts with this barren woman called Hannah, who was very much loved by her husband but could not conceive. Eventually she prayed and all of that and met with this prophet, and this prophet Eli saw her and was like, "Oh baby girl, you pray." No, he didn't say that, but he told her that her prayer is going to be answered, and she just thanked God and moved on. So eventually she gave birth to Samuel and she dedicated him to God, and basically Samuel became one of the judges of Israel, and he was the one God used to anoint the first leader we're going to talk about in today's video, and that was Saul. The Israelites started petitioning to God again. They were like, we want a king, and God was like, okay, Samuel, go and anoint this person that I'm going to show you. In chapter 11, Saul is made king, but in chapter 13, you see him already disobeying God. And sometimes people ask the questions like, when God knew that Saul was going to be to disobey him, since God is omniscient, all knowledgeable, then why did God make him king? Now, God made him king for a purpose. God's intention behind making Saul king was to use him to defeat the Philistines, because they were stressing out the people of Israel. They were terrorizing them. So God knew that Saul was the best fit to do that, and God succeeded. Like, Saul actually did lead the children of Israel in victory against the Philistines. You see this in God's intention in chapter 10 verse 1 and 24. Okay, however, Saul still had a choice in who he was going to serve. So after defeating the Philistines, at this point he's free to do whatever he wants to do, because God has already fulfilled his purpose through him. But God cannot force him to choose to obey his instructions, or to choose to follow him, or submit his life wholeheartedly to him. The popular quotation used by Christians, "Oh, obedience is better than sacrifice," you actually see it in chapter 15. In verse 22, basically, you see God telling him that, "I'd rather you had obeyed me than to sacrifice him." This was born out of the fact that Saul, actually, God instructed him to go and defeat the Amalekites, and to defeat everything, destroy everything, not to come back with anything. He spared the king for reasons best known to him, and he also spared the fattest, rams, goats, sheep, and all of that. And when God asked him why, he said that he wanted to sacrifice them to God. And God was like, "I told you to destroy everything. I didn't tell you to keep some animals to sacrifice to me." So it was in that scripture that obedience is better than sacrifice was born. It is better for you to obey everything than to use everything that God said, than to use a part of your human understanding to rationalize what God might do or might want. It was very, very clear that Saul's allegiance was to the people. Saul was more concerned about what people would say than what God would think. Everything if the people say this, it would go. If the people say this, it would go. That was just Saul for you. So it's at this point that Saul lost his leadership, and in chapter 16, you see God sending Samuel to go and anoint David. David was the least physically appealing for the role of king over Israel, but God saw his heart and said, "Nah, this is this guy I want." You see David in chapter 17 defeating Goliath. Prior to his actual defeating of Goliath, a lot of people had a lot to say about him. "Oh, you're too young," or "Oh, you're this," or "Oh, you're that," or you should probably wear. Even Saul, the present king as at that time, was suggesting to him, you should wear this, wear that, protect yourself. And he was like, "Nah, I trust God." So David was more concerned about God and how his power and how great God was, and you know how God had delivered him from bears and lions and whatnot from the past, and how he knew that God was going to deliver him again. David defeated Goliath. Women started singing praises for David, saying Saul defeated 1,000, but David defeated 10,000, and this made Saul really upset. And his reaction towards this was to kill David. Yeah, guys. So you see, like Saul just is a very emotive person. Like from the scriptures, you see that Saul was ruled by his emotions. David was a lot more, I'm feeling this way, a lot more like this. I'm feeling this way, but God, what do you have to say about this? That was David's response. Saul's response is, I'm feeling this way, I'm going to act on it. So you're seeing the difference in their leadership. Like, you should, as a leader, you are human, so definitely you are going to feel things. You're going to experience feelings and emotions and hurt and all of that, and praise and all of that, but you should not be moved by that, because humans are very fickle. So if you're moved by feelings, by people's praises, by their condemnations or whatever, you're going to, and you act out of how you feel at that moment, you're going to make a lot of mistakes. Despite how you feel as a leader, despite how you're moved by, despite how you're hurt or you're happy by what people are saying at that moment, let your decisions always be based on what God would have you do. David and Jonathan had a beautiful friendship that was pure, and it was just based on the fact that, number one, they were in-laws, brother-in-laws, and besides that, like, they were comrades in battle. Like, they would both go and fight together, and both of them were believers. You know, Jonathan was more, inclined to what God would have him do than his father Saul was. So he didn't really agree with Saul, and Saul had instructed Jonathan to go and kill David. And now he goes and he tells his friend, see what is happening, and his friend is like, crying and sad, and Jonathan comforts him. Like, it was just such a beautiful friendship. Saul was pursuing David. David had to run away from home, and he was just fighting battles and just gallivanting around the place. Unfortunately, Saul would hear that David is here and pursue him and try and kill him. However, there was a time that David had the opportunity to kill Saul, and others encouraged him, like speaking for God, that God is handing him over to you. You have the opportunity now to end this. And David said, no, I will not touch God's anointed. Eventually he told Saul, I had the opportunity to kill you, I didn't, please leave me alone. And Saul was like, I'm so sorry, I'll leave you alone. But believe me, 2 chapters later, Saul was going back trying to kill him again. There was a time he left home to go to fight against an opposing camp, and another opposing camp went and they stole his things, kidnapped his wives and his properties and the properties of the men fighting with him. And he returned back to find that nothing was there. And someone's first reaction to this would be, I'm going to go and fight. But you know what David did? David went and knelt down and said, God, what do you want me to do? Should I pursue them? If I pursue them, would you hand them over to me? And until God affirmed and told him, yes, go ahead and do this, like, he would not do anything. David was so loyal to God's instructions. He was 100% dependent on God. There was a young guy he saw, on his way to go and retrieve back his wives and concubines and properties. He saw this young guy, and it's like, there is work to be done. He has to rush and get his people that has been stolen from him, but he still stopped to feed this young boy that he saw. And it was by that act of kindness that God used to give him victory, because apparently this young guy was a slave to one of the people that had kidnapped David's wives and taken his properties. So it was basically this young boy that told him where to get them, and he was able to pursue in the right direction to take hold of his property. Saul killed himself because he didn't want the opposing camps to kill him. When David heard this, he came back home and he deeply mourned Saul's and Jonathan's death. And shortly after that, this is like 2 Samuel now, shortly after that, he ascended into leadership. David is now king. Verse 14, you see David dancing, and he's dancing to God, and his wife, Saul's daughter, sees him dancing, and because she hadn't also fully given herself to God like her father. And when he got back home, she asked him, why were you dancing and embarrassing yourself and getting naked and whatnot in the course of dancing? Obviously she was exaggerating, but she was just trying to explain how she was displeased at his excessive dancing as a king. Like, as a king, you're meant to compose yourself. This goes to show how some of us we do in church. We are not like titular kings and queens, and yet to even dance in church and to just give ourselves over to God and just worship him, it's struggle. And that's not how it's meant to be done. Like, when it comes to God, we are meant to just give him our hearts. Like, we're not meant to care about what people think, what they say. David was a titular king, and he did not care about what people were going to say that the king was dancing. In 2 Samuel chapter 7 verse 12 to 16, you see a prophecy of Jesus to come again. And all these prophecies are so accurate because they actually did come to pass. So David goes on to win a lot of battles for the Israelites, or whilst leading the Israelites. And in the course of that, one day in chapter 9, you see him asking, who is in the house of Jonathan that I can bless? Who is there? Any of Jonathan's descendants that still exist? And there was one. His name was Mephibosheth, and that was Jonathan's son. Unfortunately, in the course of the whole people trying to fight the Israelites when Saul was leader, the person that was taking care of Mephibosheth, was trying to run away when she heard that Saul died. And in the course of running away, she dropped Mephibosheth, that's Jonathan's son, and he lost his legs. So he was basically a cripple. And the person telling David that there's someone that exists in Saul's house told him that in Jonathan's house, told him that the person is a cripple. But God still blessed Mephibosheth because he told him, bring him like that. And the guy came, and David took him like his own son, took care of him, and basically gave him properties, land, and just told him, you are now basically a prince, and just gave the guy an amazing life. From that day on, to 11 and 12, that's 2 Samuel, you will see David, he saw the woman bathing, and he summoned her, and she had intercourse with her. And when he found out that she was pregnant, he sent her husband in. He ordered someone, his army commander, told him to go and make sure that this guy, that's her husband, her name is Bathsheba, to make sure that Bathsheba's husband is in frontline battle, and to ensure that he dies while doing that. Basically, that was the purpose of his instruction, to get him killed. And he did die. And after the lady had mourned, he took her as his wife, and they had the son. But the son died because God was very unhappy with him. Now, prior to the son's death, God had sent a prophet to go and talk to David. There was this rich and this poor man, and the rich man had properties and stuff. And when visitors came to visit the rich man, he went to the poor man's properties and took food and everything and gave it to the visitors. And David was like, that's such an evil man. And the prophet was like, that's actually you. And David admitted that yes, he didn't even try to argue. When he realized that the parable was referring to him, he didn't try to hide it or defend his actions. He admitted it. This is unlike Saul, who, when God told him you disobeyed him, he was like, yeah, but I wanted to sacrifice to you. Like, he didn't admit it immediately, unlike David. So it's like, you see the difference in their ways of handling scolding, being scolded by God. Very, very different. The prophet tells David, your son is going to die, and David starts to fast and pray because now the son is sick for about 7 days, and David fasts, prays, he doesn't eat. But at the end of the day, the son died, and he goes and he comforts his wife. Not only did he confront his wife, guys, his response was to worship God. I'm telling you, his baby just died. His baby whom he loved just died, and his response was to worship God. I was like, wow. Immediately after worshiping God, he went and he comforted his wife. Anyway, eventually, he did have another son by his wife, and that was Solomon. Yes, guys. David's sons had issues. There was Amnon. Amnon raped his sister Tamar, and it was such a traumatizing thing to read. Tamar had a brother, his name was Absalom, and Absalom was not having it. Absalom ensured that he killed Amnon for what he did to his sister 2 years later. Anyway, eventually you also see Absalom like scheming to be king, and he ended up being killed. You know, he got stuck in a tree and he ended up being killed. The most normal son of that David had, who was Solomon, still had a lot of issues. So it's like, let us destroy like generational habits. Like if there is something that your dad practiced that you or your mom practiced or practiced that you see yourself going through that same maybe negative cycle, please stop it right there. Because now the lost problem that David had, the sons also had that same lost problem. You might ask yourself, oh, why did God let David's baby die? But you need to understand that your act of sin can affect the people around you. Sometimes we just feel, oh, it's not affecting anyone, but usually, eventually, it starts affecting the people around you. That is why you should just always ensure that you just model the life of Christ, you know, as well as you can, because you have him living in you, so you can. Anyways, in chapter 20 to 24, you just see how more people try to revolt against David's rulership and leadership. There's something I have to point out. There was when Absalom, David's son, tried to revolt against his leadership and get people to his side to make him king, you know, and he eventually died. David really cried. He cried a lot. He wept, and the army men were like not rejoicing, because after every victory they would rejoice, but they couldn't rejoice because they knew that David was upset and he was in tears. His commander-in-chief of his army came and met him and told him, Oga, the people just won a battle and you're mourning over someone who tried to take leadership from you. And now the way he went about saying this, like, you must really hate your people for you to be mourning the death of who wanted to go against you. You know, the way the guy, you know, told David this, it was seeming like a little stern, you know. But David did not fight him and say, you have no right to talk to me like that. Nah, he didn't. Nah. David humbled himself, listened to his commander-in-chief, and actually went to the people to talk with them. In the final chapter of 2 Samuel, that's chapter 24, you see David going to build an altar for God, and he goes to buy a threshing floor to build this altar. I don't know what that is, but yeah, to build this altar. And the person he goes to buy the threshing floor from tells him, oh, my king, you can have it for free. And David said, no, I am not going to do anything or sacrifice anything to God that does not cost me anything. Like, that just goes to show like David's level of honor and respect for God. But basically, he ended up paying for it, and he left and built the altar, and the plague that was going on in Israel at that time ceased. And that was how the book of 2 Samuel ended. I hope you enjoyed this video. And I hope it wasn't too long. Have a lovely week. Please share this video if it blessed you, and subscribe to this channel. See you same time next week. Bye.